So once you've created the top portion of the phone stand, it's time to set up for this lower phone rest down here. Now, depending on the dimensions of your phone, there are certain things that are going to have to change, right? So we've already decided this distance based on the thickness of the phone. Some other distances that are going to be, kind of varied depending on what phone you have are this distance here, which is going to be equal to the width of your phone, and how much this lower phone stand here kind of juts out to the left. That's also going to be dependent on the thickness of your phone. But some of the stuff that's constant, or we're going to try to make constant, is the overall height of the phone stand, and the arch here, we're going to try to get them to be all pretty similar. So moving on over here, we're going to set up for that width of the phone. So first thing we're going to do is, after you measure the width of your phone, whatever that distance is, we're going to make a vertical line from this point that is equal to that distance. So my phone is 3 1/8 inches wide, so that's how long I'm going to make this line. Now, the next thing we're going to do is create a vertical continuous guideline. I'm going to drop it right at the very left point of this, the portion we've created already. And then from there, I'm going to create a parallel guideline. This is going to be anywhere from 3/16 to 1/4 of an inch more than the thickness of your phone. Okay, so whatever distance you have for this line, add anywhere from 3/16 to 1/4 of an inch to that, and that's going to be this next distance. So mine is 7/16, and I'm going to add another 3/16 to that, so I'm going to get 5/8 of room here. Now what I want to do after that is pre-select that vertical line we made, and I'm going to use the rotate tool, and I'm going to try to pivot that, right, using the first point of that line as my pivot point, the very end of that line as the handle, and I want to bring it right up onto this guideline. Now, for some of us, it's going to be hard to get that to be exact and to get it to be absolutely accurate. So what I want to do is give SketchUp some more information. I want them to have a more definitive entity to grab onto. So I'm just going to draw kind of a random line along that guideline that's longer than the line I made. And I'm going to try that again. So it's still selected. I'm going to drop a pivot point at the top of that line, make the end of the handle the end point of that line, and now I should be able to drop it on the edge here. Now, it doesn't seem like it's cooperating, but this is definitely close enough. I feel like when I tried this earlier, it was working really well. So I'm pretty satisfied with that, but I just want to try something, because you're probably going to have some of these issues also. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to delete that guideline now that I already have this line in place. And I'm going to see if that's going to give me an edge to connect to. I don't know. For some reason it's not. For most of you it should work. But if it doesn't, you're going to get as close as you possibly can. And doing that, it actually, it did seem to grab on. So that's good. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drop in some guidelines at 11 degrees. So right now, if we're looking side by side from my finished profile to the profile I want to create, this endpoint here is this spot right there. So what I want to do is I want to create this line here at 11 degrees and this line here also at 11 degrees, obviously going in different directions. So I'm going to use the protractor tool, and I'm going to create a guideline at 11 degrees to the left. So I'm going to type in 11, hit enter. And another guideline, you see how I have my handle out here at, going along the red axis in this case, just either way, going horizontally. So I'm going to click here and go 11 degrees down and to the right. Now this first line, again starting at this endpoint here, it's going to be 3/8 along that line. And then I'm going to hit escape, and I'm going to create another line down and to the right that is 5/16. I'm going to get rid of that extra line that was created. So now what I want to do is kind of clean this up a little bit. I no longer need this line or this line. And I want to go ahead and work from here. So the thicknesses here are 1/8 of an inch in both directions. So I'm going to create guidelines 1/8 of an inch from here and 1/8 of an inch from here. And now I can start to use my inferencing, hovering over for a few seconds until it turns magenta, and I can get a perpendicular line right here. I already have some guides here, and in this case, this last line, we're going to draw this longer than it needs to be. And you'll see what I mean by that soon. So some things are varied and some things are constant. So one of the things that's varied is this distance here. So again, mine is 3 1/8. Yours will be whatever width your phone is. Some of the things that are going to be constant, as long as we can fit it in, right? If you have a really wide phone, then this might have to change for you, but we'll figure that out. But for most of us, the goal is to have a total height of our phone stand of 3 5/8. So what I did was I just created a guideline at the very, very top, and then I created a second guideline parallel to that, 3 5/8 down. And kind of using these parameters, I can start to set up my start and end points for the body of this kind of arch that connects the upper portion and the lower portion. Now, depending on the dimensions of your particular phone, you might have to make this arc, using different strategies. So you might be able to use a 2-point arc, in which case I'm just going to click on this, the end of that 5/16 line, and I'm going to click on this endpoint right here, and then you can choose kind of like how dramatic the arc is. I would say anywhere from a 1/16 to an 1/8. So you're going to choose what you think looks right, but I wouldn't go more than that. So here I think a 1/16 looks a little bit flat because of the width of the phone, so I'm going to go with an 1/8. And now what I want to do is use the offset tool, and I'm going to offset this arc 1/8 of an inch. And when I do that, I get a nice, kind of parallel arc, but it doesn't actually reach this point here. So what we're going to do is we're going to pre-select it, and we're going to use the move tool. And we're just going to move it from this endpoint to this endpoint. It's really important to use those inference points, because if they're not actually connecting, then you're not going to get a shape filled in later on. All right, we're actually pretty close to this profile being finished. So the next thing I want to do is set up kind of the lower portion, the part of the phone stand that's going to touch, make contact with the table or whatever surface you're going to rest this on. And I think I want to create another guideline while we're here. So this is the very bottom, and again, the thickness we've been using throughout this project is 1/8 of an inch, and we're going to keep going with that. So from this bottom guideline that I made a few minutes ago, we're going to create another parallel line 1/8 of an inch above that. And lastly, we're going to put another vertical guideline in line with kind of this portion right here. And that gives us a good length for the bottom of our phone stand. And let's start to trace some stuff out. So if we go from, let's say, like right around here, straight down, you can see we already have a profile starting to get filled in. We can kind of trace out the rest. should actually be going here. And all I'm doing is kind of cleaning this up a bit. So if you notice, it's not really like an exact science. It's kind of just figuring out which lines can kind of go from the front of the base and seem like they kind of merge with this arc here.